So excited to introduce our listeners today to Joe Cannon. Joe is an exercise physiologist with a master's in exercise science and a bachelor's in chemistry and biology. Welcome, Joe. How are you?
I'm doing fantastic, Lindsay. Thanks for having me.
Oh, so glad to have you. I have to ask you, did you ever have tears coming out of chemistry tests like I did?
Yeah, especially physical chemistry, which I'm not embarrassed to say is the only F I ever received in college. 4 hours of not a lot of fun once a week, just math equations and upon math equations on the board, and just, it was not fun.
No,
Yeah.
I actually had to switch and I didn't even know you could do this, but I switched a professor at one point because he had a thick accent. I could not understand him very well.
Yeah.
And it was chemistry that totally didn't it was awful. And I was flunking. And I heard from one other student, they're like, you can ask to switch professors. And I thought, you can? So I think I still switched and only got a C, but at least, at least I passed it. Oh, I
Yeah,
don't miss
chemistry was
those
rough.
days.
I agree.
So, did you always have this passion in health and physical chemistry and all of this? When did that happen?
It's an interesting question. And I was very much interested as when I was an undergraduate in the biological aspects of the aging process. So, I'm a
Hmm.
nerd basically, and I embrace my nerdism. And so I was very much interested. Why do people grow old? What's the mechanisms behind that, which we don't know yet. And we can talk about that. There's a lot of people who say, "Oh, we grow old for this and this." We don't know the reasons. But then eventually, as I got into, as I was getting close to graduation with my bachelor's degree, I started coming across again a lot of information on the benefits of health and exercise and wellness, which again I wasn't getting a lot as an undergrad because we were basically cells and all that stuff. And so I said to myself, let me just make a little course direction change here. Went back to grad school for exercise science, and I found that my undergrad actually helped me out an awful lot. Where the master's degree actually helped me is allowed me to put two and two together. So I was really appreciative of my teachers for helping me do that. So that's kind of where it started. And then, I'm even more of a nerd in the industry because for over 20 years, I've been kind of investigating a lot of dietary supplement stuff because when I was in school, I would write papers occasionally on dietary supplements. And then I found out that, the research didn't really jive with what the advertisements were saying. And I'm like, wait a minute, people need to know this. And
Mhm.
so that continues to take me down a bunch of rabbit holes to this day, where I continue to investigate different dietary supplements, looking at the research on them, the dosages, who are the companies that make these products, and again, because people I think should know who they're doing business with and how much of the ingredients they're actually using, and what is the research on these products. So yeah,
I love that. And since we're here and talking about that, let's stay here for a minute because
yeah.
even in my line of work as a dietitian, that information does not feel readily available. We know that they're not FDA approved. We know that they're out there and we need to do our own research on it. But I have a feeling you've done all of that for us.
And you said it correctly. The FDA does not approve dietary supplements. There is a regulation, as you know. They sometimes goes by the acronym DSHEA, the Dietary Supplement Health and Education Act, which has been around since 1994, if I remember correctly, October of 1994, which basically says companies are on the honor list. They have to do what they're supposed to do, put good ingredients and not cut corners and stuff like that. And which I think it works well. It's settled law here in America. When I'm looking at a dietary supplement for myself, I'm looking for, is it research based? Is there human research specifically on it? We can talk about the benefits of cell studies and test tube studies and mouse studies, but at the end of the day, we're human beings. We're very complicated creatures. I want to see what happens when you take this ingredient or ingredients and give it to volunteers in a what's called a double-blind placebo-controlled trial. Let's compare it to a placebo. Let's see if the differences are not only clinically significant, but also real life significant as well. There's a lot of weight loss products out there that'll say, oh, it's significantly better. But when you look at before and after, numbers, it's like a pound after like 3 or 4 months. I'm like,
Mm.
well, is that real life different? In most cases, probably not. So I'm looking for human clinical research. That's really my litmus test. And you're absolutely correct. You really can't go by what you look at when you look at different websites that pop up on the internet. I shake my head at what I see as the number one and number two, results, number three results I see on the first page of Google and other search engines, because it's just like, really, I know what they're doing when they have these websites. They keyword stuff their websites to try to gauge the system, so they rank higher and higher in the search engines. I don't like that. And then they do that sometimes where even the sentences don't make sense. And Google and others are just not smart enough to see this, or maybe they encourage them to do it. I'm not quite sure. But a lot of this information is out there, but the science is complicated. And for the average person, how do you interpret this? They use statistics. On my own podcast, I sometimes go off on how they even title their studies, which is essentially a paragraph to title a study, and it makes no sense. Mm-hmm. I mean, because it's like, are they trying to impress other people? I mean, if they really wanted to get their information out to the general public, they would use plain English and wording so people can understand what they're saying, but they don't. And even sometimes myself, when I read their clinical studies, I got to read it several times because the sentences don't make sense, and they're very verbose, they're very wordy, and how they say things. So I'm critical not only sometimes of the supplement research, but also the actual researchers themselves that go into the lab and they take their time and they study these things, because I don't think they're doing a good job in terms of disseminating this to the general population. But to make a long story short, I want human clinical research on products, and there are products out there that have that. And so if I'm going into a store, I'm usually going to go in armed with the knowledge of what does the research say, how much of the dietary supplement ingredient am I looking for, and that's something I'm going to know walking in the door. The other thing I will do when I do investigate a dietary supplement, I do go down quite a few rabbit holes, and one of the things that I like to do is try to find out information on the company themselves who are producing this product. I will try to find their address, and this is something anybody could do. If you can find their address, you can go into Google and just type in the address and see what shows up. Do you see an actual building that actually says the name of the company, or is the address the same as, say, the U.S. Post Office or FedEx or something like that? If so, then that's not their physical address. They reside someplace else. Where is that other place? That's when I start going down a rabbit hole to try to find these individuals and the companies. And sometimes, again, one company is really a subsidiary of a different company, and they do that to protect themselves. I understand that, but it makes my job a little harder to find out who they are. So
yeah. And just to stop you for a second, because I feel like everything that you're bringing up is where myself as well as listeners are going, this is why we're confused. You have this professional over here who is digging and searching and having to reread. And then you think about the common person who's not living in that land every day and going, how are we ever supposed to, come to a calm sense of what I'm putting in my body feels right.
Correct. Yeah, I agree. And it's a challenge. And even, the so-called, and I hate to use the phrase that quote unquote, the mainstream media doesn't really get it right sometimes. They'll run with a story because, again, unfortunately, they're interested in likes and clicks and retweets these days too, and not necessarily the facts. And so sometimes they'll get it wrong. They'll report on some great mouse study, or an observational study where they'll look at 1 million people and say, hey, when people take more of this ingredient, X happens, whatever. And an observational study is great, but really the key thing is let's take it into the lab and let's test it on people. And so just looking at the nightly news doesn't really, help you out an awful lot either. So, this information is out there. There are websites out there that can help you discern fact from fiction with a lot of these things. I like to think that I have one of those websites, supplementclarity.com, where I have hundreds of reviews on different products, where I literally will dissect those products themselves. So if they have 20 ingredients, I will break them down ingredient by ingredient by ingredient. What's the research on each ingredient? And then what are the potential pitfall side effects of each ingredient as well? But there are others out there. I mean, it is a paid website, but I also do like Consumer Lab. Consumer Lab is for individuals. They'll actually take the things into the laboratory themselves, and they'll say, hey, this doesn't have as much of the ingredient as they're saying. Well, I appreciate that. they have resources that I don't have by actually testing products. So it is a paid website, though. You got to pay to be a part of that. I forget what the actual annual amount is, but it's a good resource, and I do look at some of the stuff that they use. But at the end of the day, no one resource has it all. And that's why I usually go to the clinical research myself over at what's called, and anybody can look at this. This is a government site. This is pubmed.gov. Mm-hmm. And that takes you to the National Library of Medicine, which is a repository of millions of clinical investigations. Now, warning to the listeners who are writing this down, PubMed.gov, reading clinical studies is about as interesting as watching the grass grow, because they are wordy, they throw in statistics and again, to the average reader, that doesn't really make a lot of sense. So what I normally do, just as I'm doing a cursory review of things, is I'll look at the summary, which they call the abstract, and I'll skip down the last 2 or 3 sentences. That's normally where you see the conclusions. And then if I see enough studies saying similar things, and I'm like, well, maybe there's a consensus here, and I'll look for some other corroborating data. But so that is something that people can do. But again, clinical studies, they're not really mentally accessible to the average person because they are complicated. And that's again, unfortunate. Some studies are better than others. Some research is way better than others. But statistics, not a fun topic for me either, just like physical chemistry.
No, thank you. I'm pumped to know that supplementclarity.com exists. And my guess is, if somebody were to reach out to you on your website, if it wasn't apparent to them, do you get back to questions as well?
Oh yeah, that's actually one of my superpowers. I reply to everybody who leaves a comment on my website or my YouTube channel or emails me. I'm really good about replying to people. Because that's one of the things I noticed a long time ago when I started, putting things on the internet. A lot of people are not good about that. And I really try to be. So are there some people who may slip through the cracks? It's quite possible. Like you, I'm sure, Lindsay, you get a lot of emails every single day. But I would say that my reply rate is in the high 90s. So I'm pretty good. People often comment, I'm surprised you got back to me, and I'm surprised you got back to me so fast. Yeah. So I'm pretty good about that.
No, that is awesome to know. Again, thank you for bringing this up. And it's not just like when people think protein shake supplements, like so you're saying supplements as a whole, whether that's like a vitamin supplement, probiotic, protein powder,
spice, ingredient, metabolite of a product. Yes. They're all coming under the headings of dietary supplement. And the dietary supplements actually have a very long and lengthy definition, which anything could be technically classified as a dietary supplement. If you can find it in nature, you can usually classify it as a supplement. There is a definition for supplements. And if the listeners want to go and look for it, just type in those 5 letters, DSHEA, into any search engine. That'll take you to the page of the FDA where they actually define what a dietary supplement is. And again, it has a very long definition.
I was going to say, you're going to be on my speed dial. You're going to regret doing this episode together. Because this information changes, frequently too. If we were to just even use vitamin D as an example to our audience today, like what have you seen out of vitamin D that has shifted and changed so frequently over the years?
Well, the major difference is when I was in school, nobody talked about it except for the fact that vitamin D increases calcium absorption. That's the one thing I remember reading in nutrition books a long time ago. And then, gee whiz, about 10, 12 years ago, boom, everything exploded with vitamin D. Low levels of vitamin D during development may increase the risk of multiple sclerosis, as you're aware of. Canada, being more northern latitude, they have a greater incidence of multiple sclerosis than, say, people in Florida. So that's one thing. You see research on vitamin D reducing maybe different types of cancer and perhaps heart disease. There are several studies out there showing that when you give vitamin D to older people, they don't fall down as much. Their balance appears to improve. That I find very sexy. what kind of a vitamin could improve balance? And it gets to the idea that I think vitamin D and also vitamin A are really not vitamins. If they discovered them today, they would be hormones. They look like hormones. They look like estrogen and testosterone and other hormones and even cholesterol. And so every cell of our body has receptors for vitamin D on it, which tells us it is important. And I don't think we understand it completely here yet, but in terms of the older adults, my thinking here right now is that we have receptors for vitamin D on our fast twitch muscle fibers, which tend to atrophy as we grow older. And that's a process called sarcopenia. And twitch means reaction speed, a twitch, they contract really fast. And so perhaps maybe vitamin D may have a slight anabolic effect on weakened, atrophied muscle fibers in older adults, helping them react faster in terms, and it may improve their balance. There may be another mechanism I'm not aware of. Again, there's just so much we don't understand about vitamin D, but it's a very cool vitamin. I do think for me, I know I take more in the winter time than the summertime. So, because I'm not out as much in the cold weather as maybe I should be. But yeah, it's a very cool vitamin, I have to admit.
Oh, Joe, we're going to have some fun. I'm going to quiz you here. I mean, we're going to keep going because I will tell you, I have listened to another episode one time where it was like somebody broke down exactly the benefits of each thing. And the motivation level goes right up when we actually understand what it's doing for us. And I think, again, it's really hard to get that defined of information on the internet unless you go through like tidbit at a time, like you do with the research, and you're just able to spew it. So let's keep going. B12.
So I have mixed thoughts on vitamin B12. I'll say right off the bat, it's in every energy drink that I've ever encountered. And because it has this reputation for improving energy levels, I think it probably would if you were deficient in B12, but I think most healthy people are probably not deficient in vitamin B12 because we store it. We got about a year or two worth of vitamin B12 stored in our liver. Yes, it's a water-soluble vitamin, but it's an oddball because we do store it. And so where's the energy and energy drinks actually coming from? Caffeine. So it's not the B12 that does anything. That said, some people may be deficient, such as people over age 50. As we get older, we tend to not absorb B12 as well. And so one possible way that you could do to increase vitamin B12 absorption, either sublingually or chew the vitamin B12 supplement. There's something about saliva that I have not yet looked into that seems to improve dramatically the absorption of vitamin B12. So that's one way as opposed to swallowing a pill. So again, older folks, and I hate to use the word over 50 because I don't think 50 is old, but people over 50, perhaps people who take some diabetes medications such as metformin, they may be deficient in vitamin B12 eventually as well. Those who have dental problems may suffer from malnutrition on many respects. So that's a possibility. So they may be lacking in vitamin B12, as well as alcoholics and maybe people who take various medications. Again, some medications may rob us, like metformin, of vitamin B12 as well. Oh, and also bariatric surgery. That's another group of individuals because, again, they're not absorbing nutrients like they should because of the weight loss surgery they've had. So vitamin B12, I think, is a fine vitamin. I think just in terms of, are you deficient? It may help. If you're not deficient, I'm not really convinced of. So again, vegans, that would be another group who may be deficient in B12. If they're not eating well, you can get B12 in like mushrooms and stuff like that. But as a rule, you're not getting a lot of B12 in vegetables. So perhaps maybe a vegan might want to supplement with that vitamin. A lot of people are under the impression that vitamin B12 helps them lose weight. I have yet to see any study where they've given people vitamin B12 supplements or injections to foster weight loss. Again, as I sometimes say on my own podcast, this would be a great study for some enterprising college student to do, but I know there's weight loss clinics out there that do this. And I'm like, where's the rationale? I don't get it.
And it's not paired with the thought, like you said, because I used to work in surgical weight loss and we definitely supplemented with B12. So it's not pairing it with the idea of weight loss is happening. They're like legit using it as a weight loss technique.
I have heard from people who tell me they'll go to a doctor or a clinic and they'll give them B12 injections. And I just think,
that's really interesting.
Don't understand it. And I've looked into it. And I can't find any definitive evidence that it actually helps people lose weight. If it does, I'd just like to see the proof.
I was going to say, so anyone listening who might have proof, you can either write to Joe or myself,
Or
and
Lindsay.
we will come back on and do a whole nother episode around this once we have the
Yeah.
proof. Yes. And just piggybacking off of, let's keep going with weight loss for a minute. Do you feel like we should all be getting labs drawn to see a baseline of where our vitamin storage levels stand currently?
I think you could make an argument for that in some individuals. I am a big fan of getting baseline readings if your insurance will pay for it. You don't have to pay for it out of pocket. I know a lot of guys. It's off topic. A lot of guys will email me and say, "Joe, what's the best testosterone booster?" And I'm skeptical of most of these products, but also, why not get your testosterone levels checked first for baseline readings, and then take something for a month and then test it again and see if things have changed. So I do think that getting baseline testing of your vitamins is probably not a bad idea. I don't know what the expense of that might be, and for me, an exercise physiologist, I'm not even sure I personally could order that lab. You probably could, Lindsay, but I don't think I would be, I don't know, legally able to order a lab.
No, we get to recommend, and then I always write down what I want them to go in and ask their doctor for, and then it happens. It's an easy ask, but you do have to ask, which I always think is interesting. I've noticed that vitamin D has now been like a regular thing on lab draws, and it wasn't a few years ago.
Right.
And now, like, my mom's vegan, and so we've been asking for a lot more of the B vitamins and things just to check baselines. But can you go into some of the watch outs for people who go, yeah, I hear you. I think I've had low iron forever. I think I've been low in all these areas forever.
Yeah.
What would you tell them?
Well, to know for sure, you get your iron levels checked. And I think that's a good thing. And before you start supplementing with iron, I think that's a really good idea. There is a subgroup of the people out there who may suffer from a genetic issue called hemochromatosis, which is essentially fancy talk for iron overload disease. Not such a great thing to have, because too much iron in the body, not great for our heart. It could even lead to mental problems. I was literally reading, it's off topic, the other day, of the Wikipedia page for Ernest Hemingway, who they suspected might have had hemochromatosis, and that may have played a role in some of his mental issues that he suffered as he got older. I had never heard that before. But so I think before you definitely supplement with iron, or even vitamin C, which is also very popular. Vitamin C, again, popular antioxidant, does a lot of stuff, collagen production. However, it does increase the absorption of iron in the body. And I can tell you a personal story for myself. Many years ago, I'm getting a blood test, and a doctor noticed my iron levels was on the high end of normal. And I remember him asking me about that. I'm like, "Why, I'm taking 500 milligrams of vitamin C. And, I got off the vitamin C for a month. I came back, we drew the labs again, and my iron level was, lower, but still in the normal range. And I wondered at that point, do I have any gene for hemochromatosis? I'm not sure. However, years after that, I did find that I did have an aunt who did pass away from hemochromatosis. Wow. So do I have that gene? I do not know. I've never been genetically tested for it, but it is something I do wonder about. So yeah, I'm a fan of not just necessarily going to the vitamin store and just grabbing a whole bunch of stuff because some YouTube expert said take it. Mm-hmm. I think it is a good idea to get some baseline readings, and again, speak to your doctor and stuff and see, hey, do I need this product or not? And I'm also a fan of the fact that, generally speaking, you can get all your nutrients from food. I wrote a book many years ago on dietary supplements, and one of the things that struck me back then was that the research used to substantiate different dietary supplements was literally based many times on people who ate the food that contained that nutrient. I'm like, So you can definitely get all your nutrients from food. Can it be challenging in some respects, like in the case of, say, vitamin B12? Yeah, it can, but it can be done. It definitely can be done.
I feel like everyone should start with food on even healing purposes, food and movement, right? And then everything else becomes these nice baseline coverage points. I love supplements to cover baselines or to bring us back up when we need it brought back up. And again, we're circling around this, and I just need everyone to hear knowledge is power. And so we can know where our body stands with with some lab draws and using our doctors and just asking the right questions. And I feel like that's what Joe and I are doing for you today, is just really bringing up some talk points with your doctor to make sure that you cover all of this.
Yeah, and I think doctors are they've really stepped up over the last few years. I know physicians I've went to, they ask about dietary supplements now, which is really interesting. What they're doing with that information, I'm not sure. Are they plugging that into a database and trying to figure things out? I'm not quite sure, but I do get asked that on intake forms, and so I'm glad to hear that. I often think that not only are registered dietitians like you an untapped resource, but also pharmacists are an untapped resource when it comes to some of this stuff. So you often hear on the commercials, speak to your doctor, and that's nice, but there's a copay usually. And you got to make an appointment.
Speak to your pharmacist. Snag your dietitian. No, I agree. And man, you are, again, a wealth of information. Thank you for humoring me. I feel like I could keep going and I'll stop right now, but I think it's getting people's brains churning, going, all of this matters. This matters. Eating the color of the rainbow matters because it all provides different nutrients coming into our body. For those individuals who feel like they could live off the same meals every day because it's just easy and it's just what they do, it's like, okay, it's okay, but you're missing so many good nutrients. So, all right, we will move on. Oh, I like this. How to pick a personal trainer, because I feel like we're kind of going into some seasons where this is going to be on their mind. So what's some of your talk around trainers?
Yeah, so I teach personal trainers. I've done over 800 live and now Zoom, because of the pandemic, seminars for personal trainers. So I know that in America, there are well over 100 organizations that quote unquote certify personal trainers. I usually like to make the distinction between certified and qualified personal trainer. A qualified personal trainer is not just somebody who takes a test and suddenly becomes certified. A qualified trainer is somebody who goes on and continues to learn after the certification. And so based on that, I do have several questions that I would ask people to ask, prospective personal trainers who are thinking about. Number one, and nobody likes that I say this, but this could be my one question litmus test. Who are you certified by? Now, I'm not asking because I want to hear the letters. And, there's a lot of letters out there. I don't know who you're certified by. There's a lot of them. There's NASM, there's NSCA, there's AFA, there's AAAI, there's ACE. So I would say, and because trainers will say, I'm ACE certified. What's ACE stand for? I want to hear in 1 second, American Council on Exercise. Mm-hmm. If that personal trainer cannot tell you within 1 second the name of the organization, not just the letters, the name of the organization, I recommend caution, because that might be somebody who just took a test and forgot a whole lot of stuff. Because I'm saying to myself, if you can't remember the name of the organization you're certified by, what else can't you remember? So, and now, Lizzie, I would encourage you to go out and ask other personal trainers that question yourself when you encounter them, and see what happens when you ask them. I've been doing it for years, and a lot of times I stump people. Now, I can tell you, I get a lot of bad feedback from people. Well, how dare you ask that question? Well, why not? If you ask me, Joe, you're NSCA certified. What's that stand for? National Strength and Conditioning Association. Okay. Yeah. Right. American Council on Exercise, NASM, National Academy of Sports Medicine. Again, it's such an easy peasy thing to ask. Why not ask it? I don't expect the general public to know the differences between them, but sure. I think asking what the letters stand for, that actually could be telling. So that's one thing. That doesn't necessarily, omit somebody from consideration if they can't do that. But I'd also ask a personal trainer, do you have any expertise working with somebody like me who has my issues? Mm-hmm. I sometimes joke my oldest client was my 104-year-old grandmother. So, do you have any expertise working with somebody who's 95 years old, for instance, and the issues that go hand in hand with that? So I want to know that. So if you have a client, or you're a person who might have rheumatoid arthritis or HIV or osteoporosis, these are issues, and a lot of trainers may specialize in certain areas. Mm-hmm. There are some and I often tell people who are personal trainers, learn to specialize. You don't have to be all things to all people. I'm not the guy that you want to hire if you're trying to get better at hockey. I'll watch hockey occasionally, but it's not something I specialize in.
Right.
I tend to specialize in older adults, beginners. I specialize again in sports nutrition, although I'm not a dietitian, dietary supplements, and also, which we may talk about later today, rhabdomyolysis, which is a too much exercise issue, which can result. I'm not a bodybuilder, and I don't know the science of bodybuilding. It is a science. So yeah, again, do you have expertise working with people who have my health problems? I think that's really important.
Mm-hmm.
How long? It's not wrong to say how long have you been a personal trainer?
Mm-hmm.
Why not? If you've only been a personal trainer a year, that's fine. Been a personal trainer 5 years. You might also say to yourself, do I prefer a male or a female fitness trainer? Mm-hmm. Some people prefer female, some people prefer male, some people don't care. But that's definitely something that each of us will ask ourselves. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's fine. There's male doctors and female doctors, and that's fine. Yeah. So that's something else to ask. You might also inquire about testimonials from former clients. That's something else. I've met trainers who have literally loose leaf notebook binders of just testimonial after testimonial and before and after pictures, which is very cool. So this binder that they carry around is basically their big calling card of what they can do. So those are a few questions that I might ask a prospective personal trainer.
Yeah, no, I love that. I'm going to tag on to that with watching reactions from individuals. Do they get defensive really fast? Are they quick to say, no, but I know somebody else in this facility who that is exactly what they do. Like, I loved where I used to work because our trainers, we used to just all pass people back and forth to the person who was the most qualified to work with that person. And I think when you can really see that out of trainers and a team, that it just means that they're in it for the right reasons too. Like, they want you to get the best results you can get.
I think that's great. And you also reminded me of something else. If somebody's listening to us and they maybe, their gym is going to run a special next month, like they all usually do in January on personal training. Maybe you don't just, take the one they give you. Maybe you say to the general manager or the owner or the fitness director, who would you trust to train your mom or dad or grandmother or grandfather? Mm-hmm. Because the trainer who brings in the most money every 2 weeks is not necessarily the best trainer. That person is the best salesperson. So I would ask, who would you trust in this joint to train your mom and dad? That may give you a completely different answer.
Yeah, I like that. I do. I like just knowing that the individual can take control, like ownership of you're allowed to ask these questions. You're the one paying them, you're hiring them. Like, it's your body and you want to keep it safe. So ask the questions. Right. We need you to once again point us to all the best places to find you.
Yeah, so I'm pretty easy to find. If you go to your search engine of choice, just type in Joe Cannon, Cannon, Joe Cannon Vitamins, Joe Cannon Personal Trainer. You'll find me. My personal website, I've got two websites. My personal site is my name, joe-cannon.com. And that's where I usually write about, personal training world and exercise and health and product reviews. And then for dietary supplements, that's an entirely different website. That's supplementclarity.com. There's probably, I think, around 450 or 500 different reviews of products. Many of them are advertised on television, on the internet, et cetera, on that website right now. And if you do the YouTube thing, just type in Joe Cannon, you'll find me. I do basically reviews of supplements on YouTube, where I show you the research for yourself and let you make a conclusion of whether it's right for you.
Yeah, I love it. All right. Send us off with one last bit of your wisdom that you would hope and pray that people heard from you today.
That's a great question. I think we exhausted my wisdom.
I'm like, no, this is a big ask right now. Maybe something that you'd send a client out the door who looked discouraged. I'll narrow this down a little bit. When you see somebody going, I hear this hope for everybody else, or I hear that a trainer is for somebody else, what's your hope-filling message?
So I would say to people, oftentimes the simple answer is the correct answer. And so, if you're looking for answers in a pill, yeah, there's some good supplements out there, but what's your diet like? Are you eating well? And you nailed it, eating the rainbow. Those colors that you eat are often the antioxidants in the food, and that plants make them to protect them from the environment, and we eat them, then we get those protections as well. So the simple answer is the correct answer. Let's focus on the basics first. Just eat more fruits and veggies and beans and seeds. There's a lot of power in those foods. And also, if you hear something or see something that kind of goes against what you really, that little voice inside of you is saying, then maybe you listen to that little voice. If it doesn't seem realistic, like, just take this product and you'll lose 14 pounds in a month. That doesn't sound realistic. It doesn't sound healthy or safe. And so if it doesn't sound good to you, just on the first thought of it, then maybe you listen to that voice and think, yeah, I'm not going to try that. So those would be my two takeaways. Again, and there is hope. There's hope for all of us out there. So yeah.
See, Joe, you had more in you. I love that. The simple answers, not, that can be the best answer. So thank you. This is so good. I've really enjoyed having you today.
Thanks, Lindsay. I appreciate your time.
Yes, hopefully we can reconnect at some point.
Absolutely.
All right, take care.